The cowboy stood in her doorway at dusk, hat in his hands, with her horse standing saddled behind him. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I'd like to buy something else." Nora Brennan stared at him, exhausted and confused. She had sold him the mare that morning for $30, the last thing of value she owned. Now he had returned, and she could not imagine what more he thought she had to give. "I don't understand," she managed. His voice was steady, almost careful. "I'd like to buy your contract." Her breath stopped. 3 weeks earlier, Nora had stepped off the train in Crest Falls, Montana, carrying one trunk and a spine made of pure determination. She was 34 years old, a widow, and utterly alone. Her husband had died 2 years prior, leaving her with debts she could not pay and a brother-in-law who made it clear she was no longer welcome under his roof. So she had done what countless desperate women did. She answered an advertisement. Rancher-seeking wife. Must be practical, God-fearing, and willing to work. No romantic illusions necessary. Joseph Farland had seemed decent in his letters. Honest. Perhaps a bit cold, but she had not expected warmth. She had expected survival. When she arrived, he met her at the station with a wagon and a curt nod. He was 52, graying, with a face carved by wind and a mouth that did not smile. He looked her over like livestock. "You're older than I thought," he said. "You did not specify an age," she replied evenly. He grunted. "Come on, then." The ranch sat 15 miles outside town, a sprawling spread of cattle and sagebrush beneath wide sky. The house was large but cold. Joseph showed her to a small bedroom off the kitchen. "We'll marry next Sunday," he said. "You'll cook, clean, and manage the house. I expect things orderly." "And what do you offer me?" Nora asked. He looked surprised by the question. "A roof, food, security, and kindness." His eyes narrowed. "I'm not a cruel man, Mrs. Brennan, but I'm not a fool, either. This is a business arrangement." She nodded slowly. She had expected as much. But what she had not expected was his son. Marcus Farland was 28, tall and broad like his father, but where Joseph's face was hard, Marcus's carried something gentler. He worked the ranch with quiet efficiency, spoke little at meals, and watched his father with a caution that told Nora everything she needed to know. Joseph ruled his home the way he ruled his land, with an iron grip. The wedding came and went. No flowers, no vows of love, just papers signed and a cold kiss that tasted of duty. That first night, Joseph made his expectations clear. She belonged to him now. Her body, her work, her obedience. She endured. But 2 weeks into the marriage, something shifted. Joseph grew suspicious. He questioned her constantly. Where had she been? Why had she spoken to Marcus? Why had she taken so long at the well? His voice grew sharper, his grip on her wrist tighter. One morning, Marcus found her crying quietly in the barn. He wasn't always like this, Marcus said, his voice low. My mother's death broke something in him. That does not give him the right, I know. Marcus met her gaze. But leaving will be harder than you think. He was right. When Nora mentioned returning to town, Joseph laughed coldly. You signed a contract, woman. You're bound to me for 1 year. You leave before that, and I'll see you prosecuted for breach. That cannot be legal, she whispered. Legal enough in a territory where the judge is my brother. Desperation took root. She began planning in secret, saving every scrap, every coin. She owned only one thing of value, a gray mare named Clover she had brought west with the last of her savings. 3 days ago, Joseph discovered her plan. He struck her across the face, called her ungrateful, and told her that if she tried to leave, he would see her jailed. That night, Marcus slipped a note under her door. Sell the horse. Take the money. I'll cover for you. So she had. This morning, a quiet cowboy with dark eyes and sun-weathered skin arrived, answering the notice she had posted in town. He studied Clover carefully, ran gentle hands along her legs, and paid Nora $30 without haggling. She's a fine animal, he said. I'll treat her well. Nora nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Now, hours later, he stood in her doorway again with the horse and an offer she could not comprehend. Your contract, he repeated. How much would it cost to buy you free? Her hands trembled. Why would you do that? His gaze was steady and kind. Because no woman should be owned. Behind him, the Montana sky burned gold and red. And for the first time in weeks, Nora Brennan felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope. Nora gripped the doorframe to steady herself. You don't even know me. No, ma'am, the cowboy said. But I know what I saw this morning. Her cheeks flushed. She had tried to hide the bruise along her jaw, but cosmetics only did so much. My name is Caleb Rust, he continued quietly. I run a small ranch north of here. I came to Crest Falls looking for a workhorse, not. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Not to meddle in another man's affairs. But I can't unsee what I saw. Footsteps sounded inside the house. Nora's heart lurched. You need to go, she whispered urgently. Joseph appeared behind her, filling the doorway with his bulk. His eyes moved from Nora to Caleb to the horse standing in the yard. What's this? Joseph's voice was cold. Caleb met his gaze without flinching. Your wife sold me a horse this morning. I'm returning it. Why? She undersold. The mare's worth more than $30. I'm offering $50. It was a lie, smoothly delivered. Nora held her breath. Joseph's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but greed flickered behind them. $50. Yes, sir. Joseph stepped forward and snatched the money from Caleb's outstretched hand, counting it twice. Fine. Now get off my land. Caleb tipped his hat. Evening, folks. His eyes met Nora's for just a moment, a look that said, I'll be back. Then he mounted Clover and rode into the gathering dark. Joseph turned on Nora the moment he was gone. You speak to that man before today? No. Don't lie to me. I'm not. Her voice was steady despite her racing heart. He answered the notice I posted. That's all. Joseph studied her with the cold calculation of a man who trusted nothing. Finally, he shoved the money at her. Put this somewhere safe. And stay away from strangers. He stalked off toward the barn. Nora exhaled slowly. Marcus appeared from the hallway, his face grim. That was dangerous, he murmured. I know. He's testing you. I know that too. That night, Nora lay awake in the small bedroom, staring at the ceiling. Caleb Rust's words circled through her mind. No woman should be owned. But buying out her contract would cost far more than $50. Joseph had paid $200 for her train fare, her paperwork, and the legal fees to bind her for a year. Even if Caleb had that kind of money, why would a stranger spend it on her? It made no sense. Unless he wanted something in return. Her stomach twisted. She had learned the hard way that men rarely gave without expecting payment. 2 days passed. Joseph watched her like a hawk. She moved through her chores mechanically, cooking, cleaning, mending. Marcus worked long hours in the far pastures, avoiding the house. On the third day, Caleb Rust returned. This time, he did not come alone. A lawyer from Crest Falls accompanied him, a thin man named Howard Shipley with wire-rimmed glasses and a leather case full of documents. Joseph met them on the porch, jaw set. What's this about? Shipley spoke crisply. Mr. Rust wishes to purchase Mrs. Farland's marriage contract. I have the funds and the paperwork. Joseph laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. She's not for sale. The law says otherwise, Shipley replied. A contract can be transferred if both parties agree and the original terms are satisfied. I don't agree. Then name your price. The words hung in the air. Joseph's face darkened. You think you can buy my wife? I think, Caleb said quietly, that you made a business arrangement. I'm offering to buy out that arrangement. Nora stood frozen in the doorway, her pulse hammering. This was madness. Joseph's eyes glittered with rage and calculation. $500. It was an obscene amount. Caleb did not blink. 300. 5. 350. Final offer. Silence stretched long and tight. Nora could barely breathe. Finally, Joseph spat into the dirt. 400. And she leaves with nothing but the clothes on her back. Caleb glanced at Shipley, who nodded. Agreed. Joseph's smile was cruel. You're a fool, Rust. She's not worth half that. 20 minutes later, Nora stood in the yard with a single satchel, watching Shipley count out bills into Joseph's greedy hands. The contract was signed, witnessed, and sealed. She was free. Joseph did not look at her as she climbed into Caleb's wagon. Marcus appeared from the barn, his face tight with emotion. He pressed a small bundle into her hands, bread, dried meat, a canteen. Be safe, he whispered. Thank you, she managed. As the wagon rolled away from the ranch, Nora felt the weight of years lift from her shoulders. But new fear settled in its place. She turned to Caleb, who drove in silence, eyes on the road. Why? She asked. Why would you spend that much money on a stranger? He did not answer immediately. The wheels creaked. The horse's hooves thudded steady. Finally, he said, because 5 years ago, my sister answered an advertisement. And when she tried to leave, her husband killed her. Nora's breath caught. I couldn't save her, Caleb continued, his voice rough. But I can save you. The Montana sun sank low, painting the world in shades of amber and shadow. And Nora Brennan, for the first time in 2 years, allowed herself to weep. They rode in silence for an hour, the wagon creaking along the rutted road as twilight deepened into night. Nora's tears had dried, leaving her face tight and her chest hollow. Finally, Caleb spoke. There's a boarding house in Crest Falls. Clean, respectable. I've already paid for a room. She turned to him sharply. You're not taking me to your ranch. No, ma'am. Relief and confusion tangled inside her. Then what happens now? You decide, he said simply. The contract's void. You're free to go wherever you choose. I have no money. The $50 from the horse is yours. And this. He reached into his coat and handed her an envelope. Inside were $300. Nora stared at the bills, uncomprehending. I don't understand. Your freedom shouldn't come with another debt, Caleb said. That money's yours. No strings. But you pay $400. I paid what needed paying. What you do now is your choice. She looked at him in the dim light. This quiet, broad-shouldered man who had ridden into her life like something from a story she had stopped believing in. Why did you really do this? She asked. His hands tightened on the reins. My sister's name was Sarah. She was 19 when she answered an advertisement from a man in Colorado. He seemed decent in his letters. But he wasn't. His voice went flat. She tried to leave after 6 months. He found her on the road and beat her to death. Said she'd stolen from him. The law believed him. Nora closed her eyes against the horror of it. I was working a cattle drive in Texas when it happened, Caleb continued. By the time I got word, she was already buried. I never got to tell her I was sorry. Sorry I didn't come get her. Sorry I didn't see the danger. He looked at Nora then, his eyes shadowed with old grief. I can't undo that. But I can make sure no other woman suffers because good men stay silent. They reached Crest Falls as the town's lamps flickered to life. The boarding house sat on a quiet street, white-painted and neat. Mrs. Caldwell, the proprietor, greeted them warmly. Mr. Rust said you'd be arriving, she said to Nora. Your room's ready. Supper's at 7 if you're hungry. Nora nodded numbly. Caleb carried her satchel inside and set it down gently. I'll be at the livery if you need anything, he said. But you don't owe me explanations or gratitude. You just take care of yourself. He tipped his hat and turned to leave. Wait. Nora's voice stopped him. Will I see you again? Something softened in his face. If you want to. I do. He nodded once, then disappeared into the night. Nora stood in the small, clean room and felt the strangeness of safety settle over her. She had spent so long braced for cruelty that kindness felt almost dangerous. But exhaustion won. She slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The next morning, she walked through Crest Falls with new eyes. The town was small but thriving, shops, a church, a schoolhouse. She stopped at the general store and bought a simple dress, sturdy boots, and writing paper. That afternoon, she sat in the boarding house parlor and wrote 2 letters. The first was to Marcus Farland, thanking him for his quiet kindness and wishing him freedom from his father's shadow. The second was harder. Dear Caleb, I do not have words sufficient to thank you. You gave me something I thought I had lost forever, the right to choose my own path. I am still deciding what that path will be. But I wanted you to know that your sister's memory has done more good than you realize. Because of her, because of you, I am alive and free. If you meant what you said about seeing me again, I would like that very much. Yours in gratitude, Nora Brennan. She posted the letter and spent the following days exploring her new freedom. She found work at the schoolhouse, helping the teacher with younger children. It was not much, but it was hers. A week later, Caleb appeared at the boarding house. They walked together along the creek that ran behind the town, speaking carefully at first, then with growing ease. He told her about his ranch, small but honest work. She told him about her first marriage, the love that had been real before illness stole it away. I don't expect anything, Caleb said as the sun dipped low. But if you ever want a friend, I'm here. Nora stopped walking and turned to face him. What if I want more than a friend? He looked at her with surprise and something warmer. Then I'd ask if you're sure. I'm sure that you're the first man in years who saw me as a person, not property. Her voice was steady. I'm sure that kindness matters more than wealth. And I'm sure I'd like to know you better. A slow smile spread across his face, genuine and unguarded. Then I'd be honored, ma'am. Months passed. Nora continued teaching. Caleb visited town often, and their friendship deepened into something neither rushed. They shared meals, long conversations, and the slow rebuilding of trust. A year after her liberation, they married in the small white church, with Mrs. Caldwell and half the town in attendance. It was nothing like her first wedding or her second. This time, there were flowers. There were vows spoken with full hearts. There was a kiss that tasted of freedom and hope. That evening, as they sat on the porch of Caleb's ranch watching the Montana sky burn with sunset, Nora leaned against his shoulder. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Spending all that money? He laced his fingers through hers. Not once. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worth it. He turned to her then, his voice firm but gentle. You were always worth it, Nora. That's what I was trying to tell Joseph Farland. That's what I wish I'd told my sister. She kissed him softly. Then I'll spend the rest of my life reminding you that you saved more than just me. You saved yourself, too. The stars emerged one by one across the wide Montana sky. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly. A night bird called. And in the warm glow of lamplights spilling from the windows of a house no longer empty, two people who had known loss found something better than rescue. They found partnership. They found peace. They found home.